Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Paul, I'm with the Dicey Review, and tonight we're going to be learning how to play the 1 to 2 player cooperative roguelite game Gone to Gaia, coming to Gamefound soon from Rogue-lite Entertainment. Now, Gone to Gaia is not fully produced yet, so I do want you to keep in mind that everything on the table is in a prototype form. Even though it does look very nice as it is, things will likely change before the final game is produced. Many of the tokens that I'm using are more generic cubes. Some of the layouts, some of the player boards, etc. might look different as the game develops throughout the campaign and after the campaign closes. And there are also some really neat 3D elements that aren't yet produced even in prototype form that will be in the final version of the game, and I'll try and show an image of the render of what that will look like on the screen now. And there will also be a number of add-ons and beautiful miniatures and things like that that I won't be using in the rules explanation of the game because they don't come in the standard version of the game. To begin setup, place the main game board in the middle of the table. Then place a marker on the 0 space of the XP on hand track, and then place a token to mark levels near the XP track as well. After shuffling, place the level up deck near the play area. Next, make a supply near the play area of the various tokens that will be used throughout the game, including damage tokens, minion and boss parts, element tokens, damage boost, reroll, etc. You'll also want to find the enemy cards that relate to the quest or mission that you're playing, and put them near the play area in a stack as well. In our intro scenario, we're going to be facing off against the Crystanids. Then each player will collect their Delver suit board. They'll then find and place the card tray that matches their character near their Delver suit board. After this, you'll insert your equipment deck into your card tray, and you'll want to make sure that each type of equipment is in ascending order from 1 to 5. Then each player will place their starting hero card on the table and gather the 3 level 1 cards from their equipment decks that match these cards here. They'll collect the matching cards, and this will form their starting hand of cards. Each player will then receive a player aid, and then each player will place a cube in their player color on all of the following spaces. We'll also use something to mark our current max health, which for the purposes of this video, we're going to be using this heart token. Each player will also receive 3 AP markers, and place your suit condition board near the play area as well. The main board will then need to be populated based on these spawn cards that are drawn. For the purposes of our example video, we're going to use the setup shown on this card. Each X represents a minion. The 2 star spaces represent starting spaces for the 2 heroes. The players can choose which hero wants to start where, and the red X will indicate a boss minion. After you're done with setup, it should look something like this. Players will also need a 6-sided die which they can place near their play area. And now you're ready to play the starting mission. Gone to Gaia is a 1 to 2 player cooperative roguelite adventure game. In this game, players will take on the role of a delver from one of 2 different disciplines within the world of Gaia. Players will be able to take on the role of specific heroes, and they can even name these heroes after beginning play. And throughout the game, players will embark on different quests to explore the world and have various adventures depending on the goal of the quest. Each quest will have a number of different waves where players can explore the world and fight different minions and solve challenges that are presented. In the very first quest that we have set up here, there will only be 1 wave to give players a brief introduction to the game. And before beginning this first mission, players are able to read through the story booklet giving them a brief introduction to the world and the scenario that they're about to take part in. In this introduction, players find out that they're the last remnant of humanity 1,000 years in the future, in a world where everything around them is surrounded by a purple fog that twists and transforms nature itself. The players take on the role of cadets who have graduated from the Delving Academy, where they train to protect the citizens of Bird's Nest, the last remaining human outpost. Mission 1 will be players completing their final exam. They have to venture out into the haze, reach a buoy, and retrieve their Delver tags, and make it back alive. The story booklet then gives a bit of context around the different enemies that you fight, as well as the goal of this mission, which is to simply survive 1 wave. Each wave is made up of 4 different phases: the hero phase, the parting shot phase, the story phase, and then the interlude phase that players would complete before resetting and doing the sequence again. Now, in the first scenario, players will only complete one full wave, which means they will do each of these steps only one time. And in the first scenario, they say not to complete the story phase. So now that players know their goal and a little bit about their heroes, it's time for them to complete the hero phase. In the hero phase, the players will decide which hero will act first, and then that hero will take a turn, and then the players will alternate back and forth, taking turns, until the players can't or don't want to take any more actions, at which point they would prepare to depart. To be able to take an action on a player's turn, they have to be able to exhaust one of their weapon cards. Players each start the game with 3 total equipment cards, and each equipment card will either be a weapon card or a passive card. Passive cards will remain face up in the player's play area, and may provide ongoing benefits or immediate benefits that the players can activate when the card is played. For instance, this shield card would allow a player to take less damage if they spend one of the element tokens in the game, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the video. Weapon cards, however, can be played on one of these different action spots on a player's board to take an action. When a player takes an action, they can select any one of these open slots to place their card in. And when placing their card in one of these spaces, they can choose to either activate the ability of the weapon card that they played, or they can choose to activate the action on the space where they play their card. So for instance, this player could either do medium damage to the first target in any straight line, or they could add 1 to their movement this turn. A player can also move a number of spaces up to their movement value. Players can move before or after taking the action on the space or the card that they play. Players start off with a movement value of 1, but can increase this as the game progresses. When moving in this game, players can move to an adjacent space, and many attacks will be able to target an adjacent space as well. An adjacent space is any space that's connected to the south, north, east, or west, or any diagonal space as well. So for instance, these 8 spaces are all adjacent to this delver. So if the player wanted to, for instance, before activating their attack card on their turn, they could move their delver 1 space in a diagonal direction like so. Now that we've talked about the structure of a player's turn, movement, and some of the adjacency rules, let's look at attacking and dealing damage in more detail. Ideally, players will want to defeat all of these crystanids, including the boss minion, to get the best outcome in this particular mission. Many times, whenever an action card is activated, players will be able to do medium, heavy, or light damage depending on what the card says. The rules for the spaces and directions of the attack are usually indicated by the card. For instance, this ion beam cannon would allow a player to do medium damage to the first target in any straight line, diagonally or orthogonally, all the way across the map if they wanted to. Light damage starts off at 1 but could be upgraded to 2. Medium damage starts off at 2 but could be upgraded to 4, and heavy starts at 4 but could be upgraded to 8. Let's say in our example, this player decides to use their ion cannon beam attack. They'll be able to do medium damage to 1 target in any straight line of sight. So in this example, the player could hit any of these adjacent crystanids, or they could even hit this crystalid that's 2 spaces away in a diagonal direction. We'll say that this player decides to hit this crystalid right next to them. Each minion will have a number of health to kill it, and a number of damage that the minion can do upon a counterattack. The medium damage is enough to kill this crystalid, but each time an enemy is attacked, players have to roll their die to see if a counterattack happens. On a 1, the enemy wouldn't counterattack. On a 2 to 5, the enemy would counterattack any direction showing a white arrow. And on a 6, the enemy would counterattack any direction showing a black arrow. And it's important to note that enemies can attack both delvers in a line. So for instance, if the player had rolled a 6 and they had been here, each one of them would take 1 damage because that's how much damage this particular minion does. In our case here, however, this player killed this crystalid, they rolled a 4, which means they counterattack and hit our delver for 1 damage. Whenever a player is hurt or loses damage, they would move their marker down to show how much damage they took. After this has been done, the minion would be removed from the board, and any minion that's defeated will typically give some type of a reward. In this instance, the minion would drop a minion part and these specific elements. After removing the card, players will place 1 minion part of each player color in the space where the minion was defeated. These minion parts can be collected by simply moving through the space. In the future, although each player can only collect minion parts that match their color, these minion parts can be used later to buy permanent upgrades as players progress throughout the campaign. After dropping the minion parts, players would each receive one of the listed elements that was detailed on the minion card. When a player receives element tokens, they will place them in one of the empty spaces above their action slots that matches the element shown. So in this example, each player gained these two elements, placing them above these two spots. Elements are useful for players for a number of different reasons throughout the game. There are some cards that may use elements. For instance, this player now has two elements that they can use with this ongoing shield ability anytime they want to. And if a player ever has two elements above an action spot where a spent card is located, they can spend those two elements, returning them to the supply at any time to refresh the action card that's in that element slot. As you can see, this can be very useful to make sure that you have more and more turns, or that you can activate cool abilities throughout the round. Some minions will give players XP in addition to dropping minion parts. When a minion gives players XP, the players would immediately gain that much XP in their XP track. If a player has enough XP to spend for the first level that they reach, they would immediately spend that XP and then gain that level. When that happens, each player will gain one of these level up cards, which will allow them to level up their equipment. In the future, if players are able to get enough XP to reach the next level that they don't have, they would be able to spend that XP and then gain that level as well. And it's important to note that you don't have to spend all your XP, just enough to get to the next level. So in this case, the players would only have to spend 5 of their XP to get to level 3. When players gain a level up card, that would allow them to level up any of the 3 listed equipment on the level up card. If a player doesn't have any of the listed equipment that they choose to upgrade, they would gain the level 1 copy of whatever equipment they choose. So for instance, the player could choose the battery and gain the level 1 battery card. If a player chooses to upgrade a card that they already have, like this beam here, they would gain the next level up for that appropriate card and replace the version that they currently have. It's also important to note that if this card was assigned or already used, that card would refresh if you upgrade it, and the player would have it again in their inventory to spend on a future turn. The level 1 beam could be placed in the back of the deck. After players choose the equipment they want to upgrade, they would discard the level up card. Players will also have a chance to fight boss minions throughout the waves as well. Boss minions work in a similar way to the other minions, except they have more health and hit harder. So for instance, if this player wanted to attack this boss minion, they could move here on the turn, once again collecting any minion parts that match their color along the way, and attack the boss minion. This player chooses to use their hammer on their attack, which requires them to roll a die to see if they attack to the left or to the right. In this instance, with a 3, the player would hit to the left, damaging the boss. With bosses, as you damage them, you'll place health tokens to show how much damage the boss has taken. And remember, each time an enemy is attacked, even if an attack doesn't remove them, they would roll the die to try and perform a counterattack. In this instance, this boss wouldn't hit our players because they didn't roll a 6 to activate any of the black arrows. When boss minions are knocked out, they drop different rewards. First, they would drop boss parts that match their level. In this case, they would drop level 1 boss parts because they're a level 1 boss. And they would give players a level up card, which simply means they would just gain another level up card, not having to spend any XP to do so. If players want to on their turn, they can move without taking an attack action. But remember, anytime a player takes an action, they have to activate a weapon card, even if they don't attack. So for instance, this player, to move and collect their boss part, could activate and play this ion cannon beam on one of their open slots. This would allow them to move and collect the boss part in their color, if they wanted to. And it's important to remember that instead of activating the weapon ability, players can always activate the bottom section of any slot that they cover. So for instance, this player could cover this slot to move, and instead of doing the weapons action, they could choose to gain one of these elements, filling in this missing spot. Now that we've talked about actions and attacking and the different types of minions that players may see, we'll briefly mention the player's available pool and the types of things they can do here. Each player starts the game with 3 action points, which are represented by these 3 cubes. At any time on a player's turn, they could spend 1 action point to double their movement. 2 action points, they could refresh 1 weapon card, once again meaning they could remove it from one of their assigned slots to use again. Or for 5 action points, they could refresh all of their weapon cards. When spending action points to take one of these abilities, the players would move the markers from their available pool to their spent pool to show that these points have been spent. So for instance, this player could spend these 2 to refresh this action, gaining another action for the round. Later, if they wanted to, they could spend this action point to double a movement, or they could save it and not use it if they don't want to. Players can also save their elements from round to round and spend them when the moment is most beneficial for them. And players may also unlock a number of different tokens that they could use in this available pool throughout their play as well, including tokens that could be spent to double light, medium, or heavy damage, or tokens that could be spent to double any damage the player chooses, as well as reroll tokens that a player could gain and spend to reroll any die whenever they want to. When players can't or no longer wish to take any actions for the round, they would prepare to leave. If a player passes, the other player then has the opportunity to continue to take turns until they can't or don't want to anymore either. And at that point, the enemies would have a parting shot phase. Any enemies that are left on the board when players want to leave would resolve any parting shot damage, which are indicated by these arrows beneath their names. For instance, this Christinid would do 1 damage to both Delvers regardless of where they are on the board. This Christinid would do 2 damage to any Delver that's within 2 tiles. Luckily for the blue player, that doesn't affect them as they're 3 tiles away, but this player would still take 2 damage. And then after that, these cards would be removed and the players could move off the board. And if there are no enemies remaining on the board, they wouldn't have a parting shot phase. After the parting shot phase, there would be a story phase in most of the games. Now, in the starting scenario, they recommend that you skip the story phase, but just to give you an idea of what would happen, players are presented with some type of a encounter that gives them options that they could then resolve, turning over the card to read what happens depending on what they pick. Players would also get to refresh any spent consumables and exhausted weapons during this phase, so they would be able to take all of their cards back into their hand, refresh their action point cubes, etc. And then players would have an interlude step where if they were playing any of the quests after the first quest, they could potentially have the option to continue and complete a number of steps, or they could retreat and end their quest if they wanted to. Players would be able to first harvest any remaining minion parts on the board if they've chosen to unlock their harvester equipment, and then players would be able to resolve the end of the quest. At the end of the first quest, players will be given a resolution that they can read through, which will allow them to interact with people in the town of Bird's Nest and make choices similar to the story cards that we looked at earlier. The choices that players make might allow them to interact with certain new people or new locations within the town, and even gain new characters and fun unlockables, which you can discover as you play throughout the scenarios. Players will also be able to keep track of their campaigns as they progress, keeping track of their character names, creature parts that they've collected, different items that they've been able to purchase in between missions, etc. Players will also unlock new Delver characters that they can choose at the start of new missions in the future that have different starting equipment and different playstyles. Players will also be able to purchase permanent upgrades that they can use on future missions as well. Even though this is a roguelite game that will reset to some degree on each play, players will be able to unlock permanent bonuses by spending their minion or boss parts to make their character more powerful as the campaign progresses. Alright, with that, you now know everything you need to know to play the first scenario of Gone to Gaia from Rose Gauntlet Entertainment. We hope that this video was helpful and informative, and as always, if you have any questions about how to play the game still, please comment below, or you can also follow along on the Gamefound campaign as that campaign progresses, as the designer will likely be able to answer questions throughout the campaign. As always, if you are enjoying the content that we put out, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever we put out new content in the future. Alright, thanks so much for watching everybody, and until next time, I'll see you at the table.